Welcome to Firstline, I'm Daniel Pizarro. A shocking video emerged this week of two Bankstown Hospital nurses making anti-Semitic and racist abuse towards an Israeli influencer. While police are investigating the matter, the question of how to combat anti-Semitism in Australia continues. Earlier, I spoke to Labor Upper House member Stephen Lawrence about how he would like to see anti-Semitism combated. Mr. Lawrence, welcome to Firstline. It's good to see you again.
Hi, Daniel. Good to be with you.
Now, the incident at Bankstown Airport is just one of a growing concern of anti-Semitic events that's happened in New South Wales. We've had many last week and over the past couple of months, but this particular video was absolutely shocking. And I know that you gave a big speech in the Legislative Council condemning the two nurses who spoke to this Israeli influencer. When you saw the video, what went through your head?
Yeah, I should just clarify, Daniel. I actually didn't mention that video in my speech because it was on the same day that the video broke. I spoke and condemned anti-Semitic attacks and so forth, but I wasn't actually referring to that video. But yeah, look, when I watched that video, as the words progressed and came out of their mouths, I found it chilling and extraordinary. And the government's acted really quickly in response to it. I think the two nurses have been stood down. I know the police are investigating the matter, seeking the full video. And obviously, from the point of view of a police investigation, all evidence, all context matters. So don't want to comment, I suppose, too much more on it in light of that police investigation, except to say that, self-evidently it was appalling and unacceptable. And anything that undermines public confidence in our health system is very troubling on that front alone.
Looking at a policy and a legal standpoint, what should be done really to combat anti-Semitism? We know that there has been various laws on a state and federal level, though there has been some concerns about how effective these could be, but also targeting those with legitimate free speech or just asking questions kind of perspective.
Look, I think fundamentally everybody knows that the best way to combat racism, anti-Semitism, all forms of prejudice and discrimination is to build social cohesion, to come together as a community, to dispel racist myths and narratives and stereotypes, and that really the future of our community in these respects really rests on those things, the building blocks of social cohesion. Law is part of the picture, and the government is responding. And of course, people will probably have seen reported that the government has introduced bills that are aimed at increasing penalties in some respects for property damage on synagogues and other places of significance to the Jewish community, aimed at regulating protests in the vicinity of places of religious worship. And the Premier has also spoken about an intention to introduce legislation to create a hate speech offence. So, look, all of those things are happening, and legislative reform is definitely part of the picture. But the fundamental task of combating racism, I think, lies with us all. And, of course, it also depends what specifically is occurring, what's the cause of what's occurring, in order to formulate the appropriate responses. And there's obviously lots of investigations going on at the moment about particularly the spate of anti-Semitic attacks. And going forward, I think the strategy is going to depend on the findings from those matters as well, because one of the really disturbing and unusual aspects of this spate of recent attacks is that the 10 or 12 people arrested in relation to a number of them on the police statements that have been made publicly apparently don't seem to have themselves personally an anti-Semitic motivation. Rather, they may well have been paid to do it. And the National Cabinet on media reporting has been briefed in relation to the possibility of foreign interference, foreign actors, whether state or non-state, orchestrating these attacks in Australia. And people that have looked at some of the overseas issues going on, particularly in Western Europe, are going to be aware that there's been a similar pattern of events in Europe and other places, and some pretty cogent reporting going on attributing that to the Russian state potentially, and this feeding into some geopolitical issues. So obviously that's way above my pay grade in terms of understanding those matters, but the cause of these things needs to be understood in order to best combat them. But of course, the fundamental cause of anti-Semitic attacks is anti-Semitism, even if there's some people out there seeking to take advantage of anti-Semitism to weaponise it politically and so forth. So look, it's not a simple matter, but social cohesion, the building of social cohesion, laws where appropriate, investigations to tackle the causes, and then responses based on the evidence of those investigations.
It's quite disturbing, as you mentioned, that there could be this foreign interference. And given the fact that we also have social media being one of the most prevalent features of our society now, a single post, a single video, a single photo that can go around the world in a matter of seconds. And then we also have, or essentially everything that's going around with these various attacks, and people I find quite disturbingly things on Twitter, for example, who have posted videos or footage or calling for Jewish people to be wiped out, the state of Israel to be wiped out, in the same way that there have been calls for Gazans to be wiped out at the same time. Social media seems to have also amplified what we're seeing. And in fact, of course, this video that we saw is from an Israeli influencer who's very well known on TikTok, and he used the chat roulette feature as well. So social media has really exacerbated the situations that we are in now.
Yeah, look, I think it's having a lot of contradictory impacts. I mean, basically, it's increasing the ability of people all over the world to connect with each other. In the olden days, which aren't that long ago, but we used to all get our information pretty much from the same or similar sources. There was a common understanding on things and a common channel of information coming to us. In the modern time, since the advent of the internet revolution, we have many disparate sources of information, some reliable, some totally unreliable. We have misinformation and disinformation that can be disseminated in real time and influence social and political events. We've seen things like the terrible race riots recently in the UK, apparently fueled and spread by social media and different communication apps. But it's contradictory because we see social movements, and I'm thinking, for example, of the Arab Spring about a decade ago now, but many since, where people have been able to unite and mobilise and share information in quite progressive ways and causes. And then there's the whole issue of ownership of social media and the pulling of strings, I suppose, behind the scenes to suit the agendas of certain people. So look, it's a really complex thing, and I think education is key because we're not going to turn back the tide of social media. And with the advent of artificial intelligence, the risk of disinformation and misinformation influencing events in real time in a pernicious way is ever more real and not going away. So we need to educate our young people, educate our community to be cautious and skeptical on information and not act upon information so readily as we might, because we are hardwired to trust. That's one of the things about human beings. We're hardwired to trust.
You are, of course, a member of the Labour Friends of Palestine group, and that, of course, have been incredibly sympathetic to the rights of Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza Strip, whether they be Muslim, Christian, Druze, whatever. At the same time, however, there has been this increase in anti-Semitic rhetoric disguised as political activism. And I think that's one of the biggest issues that we are seeing. I know that there have been many people who are saying that they are supporting the Palestinians or are against the Israeli government, but in fact have been either spouting anti-Semitic tropes, or their main reason is that they want to get rid of the state of Israel, either like a one-state solution or anything like that. How do you balance advocating for the Palestinian people while ensuring that you're not involved or you're trying to douse any anti-Semitic or conspiratorial people? Because that's one of the biggest problems I know that those in the pro-Palestinian camp have been dealing with, especially those who are rightly concerned about the IDF, the rhetoric from former Israeli ministers on the far right, as well as concerns over Donald Trump's actions and discussions. Do you understand where I'm coming from?
Oh, absolutely. Look, it's a really, really important question. Look, I'm an active member of Parliamentary Friends of Palestine, also Labor Friends of Palestine. I actually spent some time living in Ramallah in the West Bank, helping to set up a public defender system over there. And so I learnt over there, I suppose, grew to understand the sequence of events that started, I guess, in the middle of the last century. The Balfour Declaration, I guess the coming into the mainstream of the Zionist movement, the terrible events of World War II and the Holocaust, and then what happened after World War II, the formation of the state of Israel, the displacement of so many Palestinian people, the events of 1967, and then you move forward, of course, Oslo, all that's happened since. And look, I'm a lawyer. I'm someone that believes in human rights and the rule of law, and have chosen to associate myself with those two particular groups, not because I picked a side or I'm pro-Palestinian. I'm pro-human rights and the rule of law, and that's always a perspective that I've sought to impart. I think it's incredibly important to distinguish between legitimate criticisms of Israel and anti-Semitism. So if you're talking about, for example, the protest movement in support of the Palestinian people that's developed in Australia since October 7, led by Jewish people and others, the protest encampments at the University of Sydney, for example, have a substantial involvement of Jewish people. And indeed, I have many Jewish friends that are not Zionists. Of course, many, many Jewish people are. But it is incredibly important to distinguish between those two things, because to take a monolithic view about the Jewish community, to assume that, for example, they all support all of the actions of the State of Israel, that can be anti-Semitism in and of itself, of a form. But you are absolutely right, Daniel, and particularly online, I've seen many, many examples of anti-Semitism disguised as criticism of Israel, of virulent anti-Semitic tropes and stereotypes being fed into the social media narrative through criticisms of Israel. I don't think that it happens as much in the protest movements that have taken place in Sydney. I certainly have witnessed it a lot on social media. But look, the pro-Palestine activists who I've met, including Jewish people, and talked about these issues with, are keenly aware of this need to distinguish between those two things and to make sure that anti-Semitism and bad actors don't come in the back door, I suppose, and infiltrate that movement. But that has, of course, occurred, and there was anti-Semitic things chanted by a smaller group of people that arrived at the Opera House as part of that protest that occurred back in 2023. So you cannot deny these things. You need to bring principle to the fore. But on the other side of the equation, nor can you accept broad sweeping generalisations saying that the pro-Palestine protests that have been occurring weekly are anti-Semitic. The encampments at the universities are in a carte blanche way anti-Semitic. I think that does an incredible disservice to people involved in those things and to the Jewish community, representatives and members of whom are involved in those things. So it's a fraught issue, and one needs to be circumspect as a politician and careful in how you engage, careful in the language that you use, and always put to the fore those fundamental questions of human rights and human dignity. And that applies to everyone, to Jewish people, to Palestinian people, to all people.
And I know that there has been, especially quite recently, accusations among some people of the media and academics and politicians that if some of them have been speaking out regarding whether or not they're criticising the Benjamin Netanyahu government, the IDF, or they're speaking about the plight of those particularly in Gaza, that there has been accusations of a coordinated attempt to try and silence these voices. And I know that to a fact that this is also damaging to the Jewish community, who will be caught up in these same accusations. As you says, it's not a monolithic culture, and as soon as we know, we've got the case of Antoinette Lattouf. There's a Macquarie University professor that has that is under fire for. I mean, some of her tweets I have seen have been very poor, but others are relatively mild by context. But it seems that this situation, regardless of what you are saying or even when you're discussing facts, you're either going to be accused of being pro-Israel or pro-Palestine, so pro-genocide, to put that into quotations, or pro-Zionist. This is this discussion is something that it almost instantly devolves.
I think that's true, and I think that's why, as a politician, the focus needs to be on principle and to try to withstand and to neutralise misleading and unhelpful political narratives that will always be deployed by people that have strong views and political objectives quite legitimately. Some people might represent them as a lobby on one side or the other. But fundamentally, people of all views and all communities are entitled to form groups and advocate for their cause. Their community members will do that too. And it's up to government, I guess, to listen to all of that, to synthesise all of that, and to act in a principled way with a focus on social cohesion in Australia. Because, the Premier, when he said that we can't solve the problems of the Middle East, that's absolutely true as a state government, and everything we need to do needs to have that focus on social cohesion. And I think that means being vigilantly even-handed and principled in the way that we deal with these issues, because they bleed into our community. They can cause communal tensions in our community, and our government needs to be the honest broker, accept the limitations of our role, and always have that focus on social cohesion and building it, because that's the true guarantee against these things spilling into Australia. And they have spilled into Australia of late, and it's been shocking to see this spate of attacks, and we need to fully understand all the causes and be in the best position to make sure that this does not happen again.